Oh gosh.
She stunned the world with a voice beyond her years and a presence that electrified every stage she touched. But just as Courtney Hadwin's star was rising, everything changed. Why did one of the most unforgettable talents of her generation suddenly vanish from the spotlight? What happened behind the scenes that left even Simon Cowell visibly shaken? This is the untold story of a prodigy's rise, her unraveling, and the quiet fight to reclaim her voice, one that might just change how you see fame forever. Courtney Hadwin didn't start her journey in front of cameras or in the glare of stage lights. She wasn't born into a family of showbiz professionals or pushed into the spotlight at an early age. Her story began in a small town in the northeast of England called Hartlepool. It's the kind of place where people know each other by name, and life moves at a steady pace, far removed from the fast-moving world of fame and entertainment. In a modest family home, surrounded by everyday routines and quiet streets, something unique was quietly taking shape. Music wasn't just part of the background in the Hadwin household. It was part of the fabric of daily life. Classic blues and soul records were always playing. Artists like Etta James, Janis Joplin, and James Brown were regulars in the soundtrack of her childhood. Her dad, who often hummed along while doing the dishes, passed on his love for music without forcing it. It was more about sharing than teaching. Her mother also played a big part in this musical environment, often singing around the house. For Courtney, these sounds became a way of feeling and understanding the world. From an early age, she showed signs of being different, not loud or attention-seeking, but deeply observant. Teachers described her as shy and reserved, someone who didn't always speak up in class. But there was something behind her quietness, a depth that was easy to miss, but impossible to ignore once you paid attention. And that depth started to show itself when she sang. At first, it was private, something she did in her bedroom with headphones on and the door closed. She'd sing along to the voices on those records, not just mimicking them, but connecting with them. Courtney didn't sing for attention. She sang to let something out, to make sense of what she was feeling inside. Music became a way for her to express emotions that didn't always have words. It wasn't about performance, it was personal. Her voice had something raw in it, something textured and real. It didn't sound like a child playing around with songs. It sounded like someone who had lived through the stories she was singing. That kind of depth isn't common in young singers, and it caught her family's attention. Her parents began to notice how she disappeared into the music, how her whole body got involved when she sang. Her eyes would glaze over, and she'd get lost in the feeling of the song. She didn't just perform music, she felt it. What made Courtney stand out wasn't just her vocal ability. It was her emotional connection to the music. She wasn't aiming for technical perfection. She was aiming for honesty. Her influences were mostly artists who were known for singing with emotion rather than polish. People like Janis Joplin, whose rough-edged voice told stories of pain and defiance, and James Brown, whose performances were more about energy and feeling than control. Courtney seemed to channel that same kind of spirit. In those early years, there wasn't much attention from the outside world. Hartlepool isn't the kind of town that churns out celebrities every year. Most of the people who saw Courtney sing in those early days were family and close friends. But even they could sense there was something different about her. When she sang, you had to stop and listen. As she got older, the quiet confidence she had built behind closed doors started to show itself in public. She began performing at school events and local talent shows. Each time she got on stage, she brought that same intensity from her bedroom performances. It wasn't about putting on a show, it was about sharing a part of herself. People didn't just hear her voice, they felt it. Despite her talent, Courtney didn't seem obsessed with being famous. In interviews later on, she would mention how performing made her feel free, how it gave her an outlet to say things she couldn't otherwise say. That kind of mindset is rare, especially in a world where social media often makes young performers more interested in visibility than substance. Courtney seemed focused on the music itself. Her early performances in local venues and school stages were often met with disbelief. Audiences expected a shy teenager, and what they got was a powerful voice that seemed to come from someone far older. That contrast between the reserved girl off stage and the explosive performer on stage was part of what made her so captivating. It wasn't long before local buzz started to build. Videos of her singing began circulating online, and they caught the attention of people outside her town. One of those videos eventually led to her audition for ITV's The Voice Kids UK in 2017. Although she didn't win the competition, the appearance brought her some early national exposure. She was just 13 at the time, and while she didn't walk away with a trophy, she left a strong impression. People noticed the way she poured herself into her performances, even when the setting was high pressure. That experience set the stage for what would come next. A year later, Courtney auditioned for America's Got Talent, a decision that would change her life forever. But before the big stages and the viral fame, her story was grounded in something more important: authenticity. She wasn't chasing a spotlight, she was following a feeling. As the opening chords of Otis Redding's Hard to Handle began to play, everything changed. In a matter of seconds, Courtney transformed. Her nerves seemed to vanish. Her body moved with a kind of wild rhythm that felt completely unforced. She gripped the microphone and let loose a voice that was gritty, powerful, and bursting with raw emotion. It was as if she had stepped into another version of herself, one that had been waiting just beneath the surface. What followed was a performance that stunned everyone in the room. The judges looked on in disbelief. The crowd, which had been respectfully quiet at the start, erupted into cheers. She wasn't just hitting notes, she was pouring herself into each one. There was something electric about it, something real. It felt less like a performance and more like a release of everything she had held inside. Howie Mandel, one of the judges that evening, didn't hesitate. As soon as Courtney finished, he slammed the golden buzzer, sending her straight to the live shows. Gold confetti rained down around her, and she stood there, overwhelmed and emotional. For someone who had spent so much of her life singing in private, the sudden flood of attention was intense. But at that moment, it was clear that Courtney Hadwin had arrived. That performance didn't just go viral, it exploded. Within hours, clips of her audition were spreading across social media. Comments poured in from all over the world. People were amazed by her voice, but even more by the contrast between her soft-spoken nature and the powerhouse performance. It felt authentic, untouched by industry polish. It was the kind of moment that reality television is built to deliver, but rarely achieves. One of those rare instances when raw talent is on full display without filters or rehearsed charm. Courtney quickly became a fan favorite. As the competition progressed, she continued to deliver standout performances. But it wasn't just about her voice. It was the feeling she brought with her, the sense that what she was doing came from a real place, not something coached or calculated. She didn't rely on elaborate choreography or special effects. Her performances were stripped back, focused, and emotionally charged. Even Simon Cowell, known for his tough standards and rarely offering praise unless it's earned, was clearly moved. He spoke about her as someone truly special, comparing her to artists from another era. It was a comparison that stuck, not just because of her musical influences, but because of the timeless quality of her presence on stage. But with that sudden rise came something else, an intense shift in her everyday life. Fame has a way of turning things upside down very quickly, especially when it happens to someone so young. Overnight, Courtney went from being a teenager in a small English town to a global sensation. Media outlets wanted interviews. TV shows requested appearances. Fans wanted updates. And while it was exciting, it was also overwhelming. Behind the scenes, things moved fast. There were meetings with music executives, conversations about record deals, and suggestions about how to shape her image for long-term success. But that's where things started to become more complicated. While most new artists are encouraged to find a formula that sells, Courtney didn't quite fit into any one box. She wasn't traditional pop. She didn't have a bubblegum style or a polished, radio-ready sound. Her voice was rougher, more emotional, and deeply rooted in older musical traditions: blues, soul, rock. That made her a bit of an outlier in an industry that often prefers predictability. There were suggestions that she tone things down, maybe soften the raspy edge in her voice, or sing more commercial tracks. But those suggestions missed the point entirely. That edge was part of who she was. Asking her to change it was like asking her to be someone else. For Courtney, staying true to herself was important. She wasn't interested in becoming a packaged product. She had a clear sense of what music meant to her, and it had nothing to do with trends or algorithms. It was about connection. She had always sung to express something real, not just to entertain. Still, the pressure to conform was there. Social media, which had helped catapult her to fame, also became a source of stress. Alongside the praise were criticisms, comments about her style, her personality, her choices. It was a lot for someone still figuring out who they were. On top of that, she was still a teenager, trying to manage all of this while also going through the normal ups and downs of growing up. Through it all, Courtney continued to focus on music. She started writing more, not just singing covers. She played smaller shows where she could connect directly with her audience. These were intimate gigs, far from the bright lights of televised stages, but they allowed her to explore new sounds and refine her own style. It wasn't about staying famous, it was about staying grounded. Even with all the outside noise, she kept returning to the core of what made her love music in the first place: the emotional release, the honesty, the ability to say things through melody that are hard to put into words. While others around her worried about marketability, she focused on meaning. In many ways, Courtney's rise was both a dream and a challenge. She had a moment that most performers spend a lifetime chasing, a moment where the world stopped and paid attention. But holding on to that kind of spotlight while staying authentic isn't easy. It requires not just talent, but a strong sense of self. That sense of self is something Courtney has shown time and again. Even as people tried to reshape her image, she stayed close to her roots. She didn't chase viral moments or try to fit into someone else's idea of what she should be. She stayed focused on the music, and that, more than anything, set her apart. Courtney's rise wasn't gradual. It was immediate, intense, and often overwhelming. For someone who had spent most of her life singing quietly in her room, the sudden exposure felt like being thrown into deep water. The stage had always been a space where she could express herself freely, but now that same space was tied to expectations. Expectations from the industry, her audience, and even herself. In 2019, she released the Cover Sessions, a collection of songs that showcased her voice and helped mark her official entry into the recording world. The project was well received, especially by fans who were eager for more of her sound. It featured covers of classic tracks and allowed her to revisit the music that had shaped her from the beginning. It also highlighted the soulful, gritty energy that had become her signature. But behind the positive reception, something else was happening. While the covers were a nod to the artists she admired, they also unintentionally reinforced a version of Courtney that was starting to feel restrictive. The industry and the public had come to expect a certain image from her: the girl with the raspy voice, vintage style, and throwback sound. And while those things were a part of her, they didn't tell the whole story. In truth, Courtney was evolving. Like any young artist, she was exploring new sounds, listening to different genres, and writing songs that reflected her personal experiences. She wasn't the same girl who first stepped onto the AGT stage. But the music world often prefers consistency over growth, especially when an artist has already captured the public's attention in a very specific way. This created a quiet tension. On the surface, everything looked promising. Courtney was recording music, appearing on talk shows, and even returned to compete on America's Got Talent, The Champions. But underneath, she was dealing with a growing conflict. There was the version of her that people wanted to see, and then there was the person she was becoming. The two didn't always align. Performing live brought its own challenges. While Courtney had always loved the energy of live music, the constant need to deliver perfection began to take a toll. Every note, every movement was under scrutiny. Social media, which had once been a platform for fans to support her, became a double-edged sword. Alongside praise came criticism, comments about her voice, her stage presence, even her appearance. And for someone still in their teens, that kind of attention can be hard to process. She also began feeling the weight of being seen as a prodigy. That word, prodigy, can be flattering, but it also carries an expectation of flawlessness. There's little room for missteps or changes in direction. People expect you to stay the same, to deliver the same kind of performance every time. But for Courtney, staying the same wasn't an option. She needed space to grow, both as an artist and as a person. Behind the scenes, she started exploring new creative directions. She experimented with alternative music styles, collaborated with new writers and producers, and spent more time working on original songs. These sessions were often more intimate, more personal. She wanted to make music that spoke to where she was in life, not just the sound that made her famous, but the sound that felt right now. But the industry wasn't always ready for that. Labels and executives were often hesitant to support an artist whose vision didn't fit into a neat commercial category. Courtney's voice was distinctive, but her artistic direction didn't match the standard pop formulas. That made her a harder sell in some circles. Instead of encouragement to follow her instincts, she was often met with suggestions to tone it down or play it safe. At the same time, Courtney was navigating the emotional challenges of adolescence in a very public way. Most teenagers go through phases, make mistakes, and try new things without the world watching. For her, every choice felt like it was being judged. The freedom she once felt while singing started to feel complicated. There were also signs that the fast pace of her career was taking a toll on her mental and emotional health. The constant demand to be camera-ready, to perform, and to stay in the public eye began to wear her down. While the world saw her smile during interviews and clapbacks on stage, few people saw the exhaustion behind those moments. In early 2020, that pressure reached a breaking point. Just as Courtney was trying to manage a heavy workload of performances, studio sessions, and press commitments, the COVID-19 pandemic changed everything. Almost overnight, the world shut down. Concerts were canceled, travel stopped, and music production slowed. For many in the entertainment industry, this was a disaster. But for Courtney, it unexpectedly offered a kind of relief. For the first time in years, she had space to breathe. The stillness of lockdown life, though unfamiliar, gave her the opportunity to step back and reassess. There were no stages to prepare for, no cameras in her face, just time. Time to rest, to reflect, and to reconnect with the girl who used to sing for herself, not for an audience. She started writing again, not with a deadline in mind, but from a place of genuine feeling. She played guitar alone in her room, recorded demos late at night, and rediscovered the parts of music that had always made her feel grounded. There were no filters, no producers, no expectations, just her voice, her words, and her thoughts. In that quiet, she came to a difficult but clear understanding. For years, she had been pushed forward by the momentum of her early success. But somewhere along the way, she had stopped asking what she really wanted. The pandemic gave her a moment to pause and ask that question honestly. What kind of artist did she want to be? And what kind of life did she want to live? The answers weren't simple. She loved music, but not the constant pressure. She valued her audience, but not the spotlight at any cost. And more than anything, she wanted to feel free in her own skin again. Free to make mistakes, to change direction, to grow without fear. But then, without warning, Courtney disappeared from the public eye. At first, it was subtle. Her usually active social media accounts went silent. There were no posts, no teasers, no behind-the-scenes glimpses. For an artist in today's constantly connected world, silence is often more noticeable than noise. Fans started asking questions. Was she taking a break? Was she working on something privately? Or was something wrong? The answer came in the form of quiet, scattered reports. Rumors began to circulate that Courtney had been hospitalized. No official statement followed. There were no press releases, no details from her team. Just a growing concern that something serious had happened behind the scenes. In the absence of information, speculation spread quickly. Some believed the cause was physical exhaustion, the result of years of relentless work and travel. Others suggested it was emotional, a breaking point brought on by pressure, expectations, and the strain of maintaining a public image. A few darker rumors floated online, pointing to mental health struggles and emotional burnout. What made it even more worrying was that none of these theories were confirmed or denied. For fans, the lack of clarity was distressing. For the entertainment industry, it was a reminder of how little is often known about what young performers endure when the cameras are off. Courtney wasn't just another artist on the rise. She was a teenager who had grown up in an industry not known for protecting its youngest stars. The silence around her condition spoke volumes about the mental and emotional cost of early fame. Then, in an unexpected moment, someone who had watched her career closely chose to speak up. Simon Cowell, who had once sat stone-faced behind the America's Got Talent judges table as Courtney blew the roof off the place, broke his own silence. During a live television appearance, when asked about the state of talent shows and the artists they produce, the conversation shifted to Courtney. What followed surprised everyone watching. Simon, known for his composure and critical distance, visibly struggled to hold back emotion. His voice cracked as he spoke about her. He didn't talk about fame or ratings. He didn't mention show business metrics. He simply said he was heartbroken. "She had something I've rarely seen," he said. "And to watch her go through this, it's just incredibly painful." He paused, visibly shaken, and added that what mattered now wasn't her career. It was her health, her well-being. His reaction hit viewers hard. Simon Cowell, so often portrayed as the unshakable voice of judgment on screen, was revealing something deeply personal, genuine concern for a young woman he had once helped bring into the spotlight. The clip of that moment quickly went viral. Social media lit up with messages of support for Courtney and praise for Simon's honesty. Many people said they had never seen that side of him before. Others shared their own stories of burnout, anxiety, and the invisible struggles that often accompany success. What stood out most, though, was the sudden shift in how Courtney was being seen. She was no longer just a performer with a standout voice. She was being recognized, perhaps for the first time by the broader public, as a person. Someone still growing, still learning, still vulnerable. As the weeks passed, the conversation slowly began to change. Instead of pushing for her return or demanding updates, fans and media started calling for her to take as much time as she needed. The tone shifted from curiosity to care. Many people related to the pressure she had faced, especially those who had struggled with mental health issues or the expectations of high-performance environments. It became clear that her story had touched a nerve, because it was about more than music. It was about the human cost of not slowing down. In time, some small signs of recovery began to emerge. Quietly, without fanfare, Courtney started writing music again. Not under pressure, not for an album rollout, just because it helped her process what she had been through. Those close to her say that this period of rest and reflection brought new depth to her work. The music she was creating wasn't designed to impress, it was designed to heal. She focused on storytelling, on honest lyrics, on sounds that felt more like her and less like anyone else's expectations. And while there has been no major relaunch of her career, no press tours or headline concerts, there has been a quiet confidence building behind the scenes. One of the few people who continued to check in during this time was Simon Cowell. Unlike many industry figures who move on quickly, Simon stayed in touch, not as a judge or producer, but as someone who genuinely cared. His messages were simple: take your time, protect your peace, let the music come when you're ready. Courtney's inner circle also shifted. Those who stayed were people who believed in her as a person, not just as a brand. Friends, family members, and a few trusted creatives helped her stay grounded, focused, and supported. With their help, she began working on new material that reflected her experience: the highs, the breakdowns, the quiet moments of rediscovery. Today, Courtney Hadwin isn't fully back in the spotlight, but she hasn't vanished either. She exists in a space between public memory and private growth. To some, she's still the teenager who stunned the AGT stage. To others, she's an example of the very real struggles that can come with overnight fame. But to those who know her journey more deeply, she is something more: a survivor of the music industry's pressures, and a young artist still finding her way. It's unclear what her next move will be. Some insiders say she's working toward an album. Others believe she might choose a more independent path, releasing music when it feels right and focusing on artistic freedom over commercial success. Either way, the choices she makes going forward seem to be rooted in authenticity, not obligation. What Courtney Hadwin's story reminds us is that talent isn't enough to guarantee a healthy career. There needs to be space for growth, room for mistakes, and support systems strong enough to carry someone through the difficult parts. Fame may be glamorous from the outside, but without care and balance, it can become a weight too heavy to carry, especially for someone so young. Courtney's voice is still there. Her talent hasn't disappeared. But more importantly, so is her resilience. She is moving forward, not on anyone else's schedule, but on her own. And whatever the future holds, whether it's a return to the stage or a quieter musical path, her story is a powerful reminder that the strongest performances don't always happen under the spotlight.